In Brazil, a day of protests takes over the main cities to reject the increase in food and fuel prices. In Mexico, citizens prepare to hold the first recall referendum on López Obrador's presidential mandate. Gambians vote for their lawmakers in the parliamentary elections to consolidate their young democracy. Hi, this is From the South. I am your news anchor, Diego Martin, from the teleSUR studios in Havana. We begin with the news. In Brazil, a day of protests takes over the main cities to reject the increase in food and fuel prices. Citizens marched since early hours of the morning as part of a mobilization campaign under the slogan, "Out with Bolsonaro." The demonstrators expressed their rejection of the government policies of President Jair Bolsonaro, who they hold responsible for hunger and unemployment and the health emergency in the country due to the COVID-19 pandemic. They also reject the increase in the price of food and fuel. In March, Brazil registered the worst inflation in the last 28 years. In the last 12 months, life in the country has become 11.3% more expensive. The Brazilian Amazon suffers the worst levels of deforestation in its history. On Friday, the National Institute of Space Research reported that the Brazilian Amazon suffered in the first quarter of this year the worst levels of deforestation for that period since records have been kept. Likewise, the Institute reported also that during the first quarter of 2022, there were deforestation alerts in more than 940 square kilometers of the forest, the worst data since 2016. Specialists have shown their concern since they affirm that the first months of the year are not those of greater deforestation, since the Amazon is still in the rainy season. And in Peru, after several days of demonstrations, the Congress passed a measure on Friday that temporarily exempts sales taxes on basic food items as a way to reduce the effects of inflation. The measure was passed with 97 votes in favor, 9 against, and 2 abstentions. The objective of the measure is to benefit Peruvian families, and its impact will be seen in items such as chicken, eggs, milk, wheat, flour, sugar, and meat products. The regulation provides for the creation of a mechanism for the use and refund of the accumulated tax credit, with which the purchase of raw materials, supplies, and other services used in the production of exempt foodstuffs would have been taxed. The approved regulation will be in effect from May 1st to December 31st, 2022. In the framework of the trial known as the Kurita II, the main defendant, Guineans in Bolivia, testified at the women's prison in the Miraflores neighborhood of the city of La Paz. During the trial, Áñez declared herself innocent and affirmed that she did not coordinate with the police or the military to treat her as head of state when she was still not yet proclaimed herself president of the country. At the same time, outside the prison, relatives of the victims of the violence of her government protested demanding justice. Áñez is being tried in the ordinary courts for allegedly committing the crimes of breach of duties and resolutions contrary to the Constitution, for which, according to the criminal code, the de facto former president could be sentenced to up to 10 years in prison. And in Puerto Rico, half of the population remains without electricity for the third consecutive night following the breakdown at the South Coast power plant, which caused a general blackout across the island. The latest data from the electricity operators indicate that 660,000 of the island's 1.4 million subscribers have recovered their electricity service. The work to repair the system by the private company Luma Energy and the State Electrical Authority is taking longer than expected and promised. The lack of electrical service caused more than 160,000 people to be without drinking water, and classes were suspended in public schools as well as businesses and institutions closed their doors. In this context, social movements of Puerto Rico demonstrated on Friday in front of the offices of the Electrical Power Authority in rejection of the increase in electrical rates and blackouts in the country. During the event, the participants reiterated that thousands of people are going through a very difficult situation due to the blackouts. While they left at the doors of the building several foods in a state of decomposition due to lack of refrigeration. The citizens demanded that the government to revoke the contract with the operating company Luma and implement a transformation of Puerto Rico's electrical system.
I have no generator, no power plant, no solar panels, or anything like that. I put up with it like many other people because it seems terrible to me that in the face of Luma's abuse, one has to invest our few resources to do their work. It seems absurd to me.
This company has proven to be incapable. It has demonstrated its level of corruption by keeping the money of the Puerto Rican people without having the minimum capacity to carry out the task assigned to them. The best example is the overseas blackout that the country's electrical system has suffered. In these and the future demonstrations, we demand that the government eliminate the Luma contract and discuss a Puerto Rico electrical network transformation again.
United States producers met in Cuba for 3 days as part of the third agricultural conference between the two countries. During a tour throughout different farms, they were able to learn about the capabilities of Cuban farmers and the impact of the U.S. blockade measures against the largest of the Antilles, specifically on food production. More details with our correspondent, Lisandra Andres.
The U.S. delegation of 25 farmers visiting the island as part of the third agriculture conference between the two countries arrived at the Héroes de Yaguajay Agricultural Production Cooperative in the western Cuban province of Artemisa. They are coming to learn firsthand about the reality of farmers on the island and to open new channels for trade and commerce.
I hope that I can begin to open the lines of communication so that perhaps in the future we can have opportunities to open the market here, to have more exchanges for trade. It is a natural market for the United States, so close geographically, so it could be very beneficial for both countries.
Here they shared experiences and learned about the possibilities opened up to Cuban producers by the 63 new measures implemented to boost agricultural production in the country.
There could be a space for cooperation in which U.S. businessmen could invest in Cuba together with cooperatives, with companies of the agricultural system, and also with micro, small, and medium-sized enterprises. All these economic actors could be articulated in foreign investment projects. Without the blockade, we can do much more in the sense of exports. But more than that, we can support producers here in Cuba to increase their production, exchange know-how, and also now invest in agricultural production here in Cuba.
In Fran País, another credit and services cooperative located in Artemisa, they visited a canning plant where production is currently affected by the lack of containers.
I've not been here before. It's fascinating, a beautiful country, wonderful people, and just to see that the kind of agriculture you have down here, and I've been struck by the resiliency of the Cuban people. How they have been able to do so many things with so few opportunities because they just don't have access to credit, they don't have access to a lot of technology, but certainly what we've seen here today is very impressive for what they've done.
During this tour, U.S. farmers said they are willing to do whatever it takes to improve trade with Cuba.
We need to go back to and talk to our politicians back home and talk them about how, this country is very close, that, we should be able to export some of our goods to them. And there has been talk in the past, but that kind of has not happened here the last few years. But that's our biggest thing, is we go back home and talk to our politicians and say that we could help this country with exporting goods, especially corn, to them.
According to Cuban farmers, technology transfer, as well as the possibility of purchasing fertilizers and inputs, are some of the most pressing issues for the island's farmers.
If we manage to do all this and bring development and technology to our fields, adding to it what we have, we are a large mine that has not been fully exploited yet. I think we could get closer to really know what is the productivity of our soil, which today is immeasurable.
Farmers from both countries agreed that the challenge of ensuring food security is common to all nations. And in this regard, Cuba and the United States have much to contribute. So it is time, they said, to begin to break down the barriers that currently limit this exchange.
Lisandra Andres, teleSUR, Artemisa, Cuba.
We're going to take a short break now. Please join us again after this. Hi, and welcome back to From the South. In Mexico, citizens prepare to hold the first recall referendum on the presidential mandate of President Andrés Manuel López Obrador. Around 93 million Mexican citizens are waiting for the 10th of April to be able to exercise their vote in the process promoted by the Mexican president himself. The National Electoral Institute has made a statement in response to the uncertainty of Mexicans and indicated that it will install at least 57 polling stations for the electoral event due to previous declarations by the entity where it pointed out the lack of supplies to hold the recall. It should be clarified that for the result to be binding, a minimum turnout of at least 40% of those registered on the electoral roll must be counted. And in Mexico, the Supreme Court validated as constitutional the electric industry law as a part of the reform process in this sector that the government of Andrés Manuel López Obrador is carrying out. 4 ministers of the highest judicial body voted in favor of the entire bill, which endorses the constitutionality of the electrical law. The measure qualifies as unfounded the arguments against it previously presented by senators of the opposition as well as by the Federal Commission of Economic Competition and the government of the state of Colima. The resolution stated that the bill does not violate free competition and concurrence, as argued by opposition sectors. Venezuela's President Nicolas Maduro led the closing ceremony of the 16th National History Congress and the third at the international level. The ceremony was held at the Plaza Bolívar Chávez in the state of La Guaira with the attendance of 530 speakers. The Congress was part of the celebration for the 30th anniversary of the events of February 4th, 1992 and the 20th anniversary of April 13, 2002, important milestones in the history of Venezuela and in the shaping of the Bolivarian Revolution. Now, the country's president, Nicolas Maduro, denounced the creation of a Western media dictatorship against Russia.
The media war, the media dictatorship of Venezuela and the world. Today, more than ever, we're witnessing a media dictatorship of the West against the world to justify an escalation that could lead to a disastrous war, to a third world war. The West is aligning itself economically, politically, diplomatically, and militarily to go to a great war against Russia. From Venezuela, we denounce it. They want to go to war to break Russia into pieces, to destroy it, and to end the hope of a multipolar world where we all can live.
Russian authorities announced the initiation of a criminal case to investigate the premeditated spread of fake news about the actions of its armed forces during their special military operation in Ukraine. The Russian Investigation Committee specified that the file is addressed to the Ukrainian forces and other unidentified persons for abuses against the civilian population. This measure was taken hours after the militias of the Donetsk People's Republic reported that some 30 people were killed and another 100 resulted injured by a missile attack on a railway station in the city of Kramatorsk. The Russian Ministry of Defense stated that Moscow was not involved in the attack and said the fragments of the Tochka-U missiles were found near the site of the attack, stating that only Ukraine uses this type of weapons. Russian Defense Ministry accuses Kiev of carrying out a deadly attack on a railway station in the city of Kramatorsk in eastern Ukraine that claimed dozens of lives. The Russian military stated that the aim of this offensive was to prevent the evacuation of residents from the city, to use them as human shields to defend positions of the Ukrainian armed forces.
The armed forces of Ukraine attacked the railway station in Kramatorsk with a Tochka-U tactical missile. Tactical missiles Tochka-U, the fragments of which were found near the Kramatorsk station, are used only by the armed forces of Ukraine. During the special operation, 8 Ukrainian Tochka-U launchers and about 90% of the missiles from the arsenals were destroyed. However, the threat of Kiev regime continuing provocations and the rocket attacks on civilian settlements remains high.
Russia's Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov said Friday that Russia-Ukraine talks are not proceeding easily, but Moscow will strive to achieve all goals. The head of Russian diplomacy also advocates for the inclusion of Belarus in the list of Ukraine's security guarantors.
I discussed with my colleague and friend how the negotiating contacts between the Russian and Ukrainian delegations are developing now. They are not proceeding easily, but we will strive to ensure that all the goals of these negotiations are achieved. We propose that the Republic of Belarus would certainly be among such guarantor states. Now all these issues, including the full list of guarantor countries, are being coordinated, but we stand for Belarus to be among them.
France closes the electoral campaign for the first round of the presidential elections, a quite open electoral appointment in which the polls indicate Emmanuel Macron and Marine Le Pen as the two most voted forces, but with the mystery of abstention and the undecided could change the balance to the left with candidate Jean-Luc Mélenchon. More details in the following report.
France is preparing for the polls to be held again this Sunday, with candidate Emmanuel Macron seeking a second term in office after 5 years marked by yellow vest protests, neoliberal policies and the pandemic management.
We see more and more in the polls that Marine Le Pen and the extreme right are getting higher and higher. And today the only candidate who can stand up to this is Emmanuel Macron. And not only voting for someone against the extreme right, but because he truly has a project, a vision for France. He's the only one who during the crisis today and during the crisis in Ukraine makes of Europe not only a resource, but really the resource par excellence.
The far-right Marine Le Pen appears second in the polls and is emerging as Macron's rival in the ballot on April the 24th. Her former parliamentary advisor meets us in a cafe in the center of Paris to analyze the change of direction of the candidate who has renamed the National Front and is presenting herself as a moderate after losing the 2017 elections.
Marine, as of 2018, changes her political strategy, withdraws from the exit of the European Union, withdraws from the exit of the euro, withdraws from the more sovereign line, that is to say, in favor of an authentic democracy in France, and there begins an important turn towards more right-wing, this is that to say authentically liberal, even at the time giving up retirement at 60, although she has gone back to that issue, but for a while she had doubts, and then she has made a very important turn, that is the Congress of the National Front of 2018.
Out of the 10 remaining candidates, Jean-Luc Mélenchon is the only one with a chance of making it to the second round, and he is presented as the candidate of the useful vote in a divided left that could hold back the right.
In the last poll conducted, Mr. Emmanuel Macron is in the first place, followed by Marine Le Pen and then Mr. Mélenchon with 17% of the votes. Mélenchon must beat Marine Le Pen in the remaining days in order to make it to the second round on April 24th.
The French electoral campaign opens the possibility for the nearly 49 million French voters to reflect on the April the 10th elections, in which the ghost of abstention and undecided voters will decide which side will tip the scales. France closes an intense electoral campaign in which the results are still open, although polls point to a second round between Emmanuel Macron and the far right, Marine Le Pen is assured.
Sergio Rodrigo y Carlos Gil, teleSUR, París.
We have more news coming up after one final short break. Please stay with us. Hi, and welcome back. Gambians vote for lawmakers in parliamentary elections that should consolidate a young democracy and may see President Adama Barrow strengthen his power after winning re-election last year. The country uses a unique system where voters cast their ballots using marbles. Voters in the small and impoverished West African state will renew the unicameral National Assembly's 58 seats for a 5-year term. The single-round vote will choose 53 lawmakers, while Barrow, serving a second 5-year term after last December's electoral victory, will name the 5 others, including the parliament's president. Polling stations are due to open at 8 a.m. local time and close at 5 p.m. An uneventful month of campaigning concluded on Thursday evening, and results are expected on Sunday.
It is very important election, this National Assembly election, because these are the people who will represent us at the Parliament. They are there for we. Anything we decide, we have to go with them and tell them this is what we're looking forward. We put them there so that they can stand for us. Yes.
And with more on Africa and Kenya, years of unchecked exploitation inflicted terrible damage on the mangroves, mudflats, freshwater pools, and sandy dunes at the mouth of the Sabaki, the second longest river of that nation. Now communities are replanting the shrubs. For generations, villagers living near the Sabaki estuary had relied on its natural bounty for lumber and firewood, fresh water, seafood, farming land, and plants for traditional medicine. The coastal wetland is also a resilient ally in the face of the changing climate, storing carbon, filtering water pollution, and protecting against extreme weather and rising sea levels. But years of unchecked exploitation inflicted terrible damage on the mangroves. Mangrove wood was chopped down to feed construction in fast-growing coastal towns like nearby Malindi, a popular tourism hub. One tree at a time, local villagers are bringing the estuary back to life. For local communities, there are economic benefits in rehabilitating nature.
So the point at which we've got to now, globally, in Africa, in Kenya, or just looking at the Kenyan coast, is the population density is very high already, and the amount of resources that have already been extracted by fishing, by clearing vegetation, by cutting wood for charcoal or for construction and things like that, is we are already at an ecosystem or environmental deficit right now. So we can only benefit ourselves and nature by restoring ecosystems right now.
A lot, but for the mangroves, the ability to bounce back and come back and colonize the areas they used to be in the past is quite encouraging.
Rwanda has become one of the few African countries to achieve the goal of vaccinating over 60% of its population against COVID-19. By 2021, the East African nation already administered vaccine to 40% of its 12 million citizens, a number that reached the World Health Organization's target period. The country's vaccination rate nation small island nations of the Seychelles and Mauritius. To continue this trend, authorities in the capital, Kigali, have set up vaccination sites in busy public places like bus stations. Medical staff say between 200 and 400 residents receive jabs each day, and many of them have already registered for booster shots. Rwanda remains an exception as, according to the World Health Organization, only about 15% of the continent's population is fully vaccinated. We've come to the end of this news brief. Remember, you can find these and many other stories on our website at teleSUR English. You can also join us on social media for all the latest news. We're on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and Telegram. For teleSUR English, I am Dio Martin. Thanks for watching.